Before we start, I just want to point your attention to the pamphlets that are called Wonders. They come out every week. I don't know if they're available everywhere every week, but they're an anthology of the teachings of Rav Ginsburg. And this year we're concentrating on the Parsha. So there's a short article for each one of the Aliyahs, usually, plus a story and other things. And this week's Lech Lecha, on the back, there's information about the two bigger events that we're doing here. Shabbos in Oxnard, which is still open. You can still come. And the Shabbos is a whole Shabbaton with food and davening and at least 3 different, I think, shiurim that I'm supposed to give. And then on Sunday is the main thing that I really want to invite you to. It's a mini course on what we call the road to self-fulfillment. And this is one of the topics that has become more and more important in our generation, especially this concept of self-fulfillment, which for many generations was frowned upon in Yiddishkeit, and is now what in Hebrew we'd call your shlichus, your mission in life that you need to fulfill. So we'll be talking about how to define it, how to find it, but more importantly, in the end, how to actually carry it out, how to be able to actually fulfill yourself in life. So that'll be about 4 hours. I think it's 2 classes and then a workshop on different tools that can be used to develop this. The topic tonight, I think, if I remember correctly, is why are men and women so different? And I was expecting there to be, well, not expecting, but I was thinking there would be 70 people under the age of 20, because they stand the most to gain from this. We're older already, so, whatever we have, we probably have already. But this topic is important enough that I think it's one of those things that when you get it, it really changes every relationship that you have. And I'll really try to do my best to give it to you as well as I can, because it's a topic that I've been studying for about 20 years now. And I have to say that finally the what we call in Hebrew the makeh b'patish, the final blow that put it in place, that drove it into me, was something that my wife told me 2 months ago. And suddenly I told her, you don't know what you just did. You like took everything I've been learning for a long, long time, and you were able to say it in one sentence. And now I know how to teach this. Now I know how to even grab this thing. There's something I want to start with, which is a very true observation, I think, that I heard from Manis Friedman. He said that his advice, somebody asked him, what's your advice for couples? We talked about this on what was it, Wednesday? Yesterday, I don't remember. So he said his advice is, if you're not married, run away from each other as quickly as you can, because men and women can't be together. The only way they can be together is if they're married. You need male friends if you're a male, you need female friends if you're a female. Don't try to mix. And if you don't have that commitment of marriage, it's very hard to hold it together. Because, and this he didn't say, but it's the undertext, the subtext here, is that we're so different that it's almost like 2 different species. It's almost like there's something that's not meant even to be together, and you need some assistance from above, and everybody understands that. That's why there's this concept of marriage, which is usually sanctioned in a religious, in some kind of ceremonial way, in order to make it possible to be together. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, but I'm talking about the general principle. The general principle is that men don't get women and women don't get men. And even after living together many, many years, you still are like, so what makes him tick? And she's like, what makes him work? And he says, what is she about? He doesn't get it. And you sort of figure out how to live together, but it's not so clear that you understand what the other side wants. So to begin our journey into this question, so what makes us so different? Why are we so different? So the natural place to look is in the Torah. And the Torah describes, the way it describes the creation of man and the woman is actually in two different stories. We know this. The first story says, sort of, that God created man, Adam, and he created them male and female. And there it seems that everything is just normal. Nothing special. They're created. He blesses them. And end of story. Finished. The second story, though, goes into detail. The second chapter of Genesis goes into detail that we really have to think about, what it means. So the general story is that he creates man, and we don't know anything about this man exactly, but we know that there's no woman. There's no female. There's just man. But this man is apparently more complex than just being male. Why? Because after he's not able to find a companion, he puts him to sleep, and he takes a side of him, which is mistakenly usually translated as a rib, but really the meaning is he took a side, and we'll talk about what side he took, which implies that this person that he created, this man that he created, was not exactly the regular type of person that we know. That he had a masculine side and a feminine side. In some way he had to take them apart. So everybody knows this story. I haven't said anything new. Right? I hope. This is very well known. And then they come together, and that works out for about 3 hours. And then they're separated for 130 years. So what do you understand? And what do they do in the middle? Nothing of positive consequence, let's call it. The opposite. And they're very angry at one another, apparently. So there's something really, like, what's going on here? What's the secret of, and why did God do it this way, and what's going on? So the first key is to understand what does this story, the way the Torah tells it, what does it reveal to us about our origin as a male or as a female? The male, what's his origin? He was created by God. Meaning, there's even a chapter 144 in Psalms, in Tehillim, and this is a chapter we'll look at. This is a chapter that's attributed to Adam when he was created. And he says, I know you. Like, I know you as the one who created me. That's his frame of reference. That's his starting point in the world, the point of origin. I came from God. I can't know exactly God. I don't know exactly what it is, but that's my feeling. I came from God. But to really understand what that means, you have to ask, so according to the story, what does the female feel? Where did she come from?
Him.
She came from man. Needs to sink in. It's a completely different existential feeling about what life and what I am about. What is my origin? Where did I come from? So if I'm a man, a male, my feeling is that I'm always, my starting point, if I fall back into my existential state, the most basic feeling of life is that I'm standing beneath God. That's pretty big. But the female's existential feeling, the very basis of life for her, is that I was taken out of man, not taken out of God. Again, the first story is different. The first story, it sounds like they were just created equally from God. We don't have any details. But then when the second story, which is meant to give us a lot more psychological background into ourselves, it comes and says that a woman always feels, or like the point of origin is, that I was taken out of man, out of a male. And I guess that's what female means. I don't know exactly how to do it etymologically in English, but in Hebrew, that's exactly what it says. He says, "Lazot yikra isha." This will be called a woman. Ki mi'ish lukach hazot, because she was taken from man. But we usually think about it as some kind of I don't know if some kind of story about the biology. But what I want to impress on us now is that this is more a story about the psychology than about the biology. And the biology actually doesn't matter so much. It matters, but not in this case. I want to understand what is the basic ground feeling of being a man and being a woman. Okay, so let's put that aside a second. Now I have to make a little bit of an introduction. Anything that we learn in Hasidic psychology starts with a very, very important quality that we all have and possess, which is in Hebrew called bittul, and it means self-nullification. And I can't tell you how many times this word is mentioned in every single Hasidic work. Innumerable. Simply no number to it. And there's all kinds of different levels of self-nullification and so on. The problem is that you can't really say this to a woman. It doesn't fit. And I know that it doesn't fit. How do I know that it doesn't fit? Because, first of all, I live with my wife. I know it doesn't fit. And with my daughter, and I know it doesn't fit. But I also see a lot of women that I teach, and I've taught this over 20 years now, and I see that there is some kind of dissonance in getting this. And I've always felt that, why is it so difficult? Men get it right away. They don't have a problem with it. They don't have a problem saying, I don't exist. They can all do this. But for some reason, women can't. Even if they do, it doesn't feel natural. There's something off. So when you teach this for 20 years and you're trying to help people and you're working on it, so you come to a certain point where you say, oh, you just have to try harder. It didn't cross my mind that maybe, well, it did cross my mind, but I didn't have an answer. Like maybe what women need is something else. It's not self-nullification, it's something else. So then my wife gave me the answer very simply. She said, men are easily convinced that they should do self-nullification because they're standing completely under God. For them to nullify leaves what? God. That's a lot. The moment that you nullify, what are you revealing? You're revealing your source. My source is amazing. I came from God. That's a feeling that I have. Let's say I don't self-nullify. Now you understand why the ego is so big. Because if I don't nullify, then who am I? Where did I come from? What's my origin? It's also God. The ego in a male is like a reflection of the origin. And so it can be huge. No problem. He's got a God complex. It's very uncommon to attribute something like that to a woman, that she has a God complex. It's like almost can't even understand what that would mean. So bittul is not so great for women. It doesn't work so well. So what does work well? What does a woman want, and why is she different? Because she was pulled out of the man. So what is at the basis of her experience? It's needing to be connected back. It's the need for connection, for belonging. And I have to say, when my wife told me this statement, like I jumped up and down, and I went up and down the stairs, and I said, I have to think about this, organize this, and then I called everybody up and I said, what do you think about this? What do you think? What do you think? And everybody who teaches our brand of Hasidic psychology was like, okay, everything started working, and people said, I've been explaining this anyway, but I know nobody's been explaining it this way. But that suddenly shed so much light, especially as a man, for me to look at my wife and say, what does she want from me to be reconnected? Okay. I want to go back to where I was. Now, obviously, she doesn't want to go back to becoming like that. We should become one thing, but psychologically, that is it. I was doing some couples therapy earlier today, and the woman was very open about the fact that she has been trying to explain to her husband that 24 hours a day, every day, he's inside her mind. Now, if you say that to a man, how many times a day do you think of your wife? What's the answer? Is it okay to ask how many times a week? Something like that. Why? Because what is a man thinking about all the time? He's thinking about God, he's just calling it himself. Because that's what he feels. He's thinking about God, but God is ungraspable, so he's thinking about himself. Because he's the direct descendant, as it were, of God. That's how he was created. So that's what he has in his mind all the time. So there's not much room for anything else. There's no even direct need for connection. If I connect as a man, it's because it has utility. It gives me something. It's not existential. There's very few men who can't be with themselves alone for an indefinite amount of time. They can. Maybe they don't want to, but they can. But because of that, we also have a very hard time understanding what it is that women want. Because they don't want what we want. They don't need what we want. So we need this feeling to know that we and God are okay. That we're getting along, let's call it. But a woman needs to know that she's getting along with everybody around her, especially with her husband. Because it's almost a feeling like that I've been severed from my place and I have to reconnect there. And so if you don't give me a feeling that I'm connected to you, if you don't give me a feeling that you're interested in this connection, then you haven't given me anything. It doesn't matter what you give me. Because that's at the very basis of everything. That I feel disconnected. I feel torn out of my place. So men are always very comfortable in their skin. There's no problem. It's okay. Again, it can be like very egotistic. It could be like they really hold from themselves or something like that. That's also very common. But the main thing is that I'm okay. I'm okay by myself. And I don't really need anyone. And if you take a man and you cut down everything around him, it says, okay, I'm fine. I have no problem. It's not like he's giving up anything. It's his natural state. He was alone. Except that he was alone, and God said it's not good for him to be alone. But he doesn't get it. Because this nature of needing connection is not something natural. It's what happens when you're created directly from God. That's your experience. That you stand. You have standing in the world. So this is a very important revelation, and I think that you need time to process it. It's not something that's you can say. I can say it quickly. I just did in like 10 minutes. I could probably say it in a minute also, but the repercussions are incredible. Because if you really understand what this means, you begin to understand, especially for me, coming from the point of view of a male, you begin to understand what is it that women want. You begin to understand what your wife wants. Why is she disappointed when it doesn't seem like you're interested in the connection all the time? And why is it not disappointing to you? Why do you not care even? Because you don't need it. You need something else. What do you need? So here we're going to say that men deep down, what they need to feel, and this is almost like, again, something that most women find very difficult to work with. They need to feel that they're godly. Now there's all kinds of ways to feel that, right? There's a person who feels, I'm godly, that means that I'm very pious, and I don't think of myself, and I'm completely committed. But godly means that I provide, that I'm able to be like Hashem who creates the world, because that's where I came from. And so the worst thing that a man can experience, that the male can experience, is having that put down. Like, you're not a good provider. You're not able to satisfy me. You're not able to give to me, and so on. Those kinds of words, what they do is they completely cut him down. He can't recuperate from that. And if he hears it long enough, then he loses all belief in himself. Because that's what it means to be a male, that I came directly from God. If I came directly from God, I should be like God. That's what it means. Adam literally means Adam Elyon. I want to be like the one above. That's at the core. But then, as a male, I don't understand what my wife wants, which is connection, which is something entirely different. Because if I was torn apart from my source, so I need to feel the connection, that I'm back where I belong. So this sense of belonging, how do you belong? So I said that after 3 hours, they got divorced and they were apart for 130 years. According to the Rebbe, there's all kinds of explanations. The Rebbe has an explanation that Cain and Abel weren't born right away. Like a lot of people think that they were born in Gan Eden at the same. The Rebbe says that this was much, much later. In any case, when Cain was born, so Chava says, Kaniti ish et Hashem. What have I done? I've forced him, I've bought him, I've purchased him. Meaning that by having a child, I have him right where I want him. He can't run away. Because he now has to provide for the child also. That's why the Torah looks at the relationship between a husband and wife as he purchasing her. What kind of an idea is that? Because that's exactly what it takes for someone to feel that they're wanted, that they belong. They need that feeling of connection. Not connection because rationally we decided. No, it has to be something that expresses much more than that. It has to express some kind of longing that this is something I want to possess and bring back into me. That's why it's called kinyan. But she also wants to possess him or make him possess her. Kaniti ishat Hashem. I bought my husband. He bought me, but I also want to buy him back. And you use all this language of buying and possessing. Why? Because in the end, the marriage is something that the woman wants more than the man. And this, the sages say in a statement, that every woman says, Tav lemeitav tandum, lemeitav armilu. It's better to be together than to be alone. What's new about that? They say that she'll prefer to be in a marriage that she doesn't like than to be alone. It's better to be or belong. It's better to belong to a relationship that might even not be so good for me than to stay alone at home, than to be alone. Because then I don't have my point of origin. I've lost my origin. I've lost my basis, my foundation of being. Okay, so this is the first observation. And like I said, this is something that you can begin to analyze, and I think it's a great thing to use as a tool to analyze our relationships, to talk about it and to begin to understand why the male acts the way, the husband acts the way he does, and the woman acts the way she does. And to begin to understand, when you understand why someone acts a certain way, it's much easier, first of all, to respect it, to accept it. And then, if you're a little bit more advanced, then you can even not just accept it and respect it, but even think about it ahead of time. You can sort of guess where things are going. You can guess what's needed at every moment. But let's leave this for now. I want to develop this further. There's one thing that the sages say, that during intimacy, each one looks at their origin. That's another thing that they say. That the male looks down, and the woman looks up. How is that connected to all this? It says that the male, he looks down at the ground. Why? Because he came from the ground. He came from earth. But she looks up, so what's the explanation when she looks up? Does it mean she looks at God? But we just said she didn't come from God, she came from man. So she's not looking at God. She's looking at where she came from. She's actually looking at him. And he's looking down, not necessarily at her. So I have to accept this, that this is like how we see each other. But if we make it equal, that he's looking at her and she's looking at him, then for him to look at her, he has to look down. And for her to look at him, she has to look up. So it's not, there's no equilibrium. There's something off here in this whole picture. Let's take this one step further, and I'll give another example of this. When Yitzchak and Rivka, Isaac and Rebekah, are praying for children, so it says that he was in one corner, she was in another corner, and eventually, after 20 years of prayer, God answers their prayer. But it says in the Torah that he didn't exactly answer their prayer, he answered his prayer. And you have to ask, two people who are pious, both of them, they're praying to Hashem to give them children, and they're doing it for 20 years, which is an incredible investment. And in the end, how do you feel about that the Torah says that he listened to his prayer? That's not very nice. She did just as much. In fact, how do we know that they really did this together? Because Yitzchak plus Rivka in Gematria equals tefillah. It's equal to davening. It's equal to prayer. So they're the ultimate praying couple, but together. So so Chazal have to do something, the sages have to do something with this. How do you explain this? So you say something very interesting. They say that it's true that they both invested in this equally. But there's a difference between him and her. He is what we call a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik. Who is his father? Avram. She is a tzaddik, the son of a rasha. So she's pious, but she's the daughter of someone who's very evil and very crooked. Who's her father? Who's Rivka's father? Betuel. Right? Lavan and Rivka are brothers. So she became a tzaddik because he didn't so much. But then the sages say that when Hashem answers, he answers first the tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik, only then the tzaddik, son of the rasha. So it's not about how much they did, it's about their pedigree, it's about their ancestry. And so you sort of get out of that question of how can it be that they davened together and he was the one who was answered and not her, because you say it's not because of her or him, it's because of their parents. Said, okay. But now, let's think about this a little bit. What does this mean? They're a very good couple. And a very good couple that has true equilibrium and works together and for 20 years can invest in the same act together. How many couples do you know who've been able to do that? So it's a very special couple. But the ideal is not to both be tzaddikim, the son of tzaddikim. The ideal is not to be pious, the son of pious. One has to be the son of a rasha. Now what did we say before? That Adam is created from who? From God. So the male is a tzaddik ben tzaddik. He's a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik. What about the woman? Who was she created from? From Adam. From the male. And she's called a tzaddik ben rasha. She's called a tzaddikus, but she's the daughter of a rasha. Who's the rasha? Adam. So this is very interesting. It follows. So the woman is always, in a couple, she always has to see herself that she's a tzaddikus, but she comes from a rasha. We'll see in a moment what this means. But it's like, even though I want a connection back to where I came from, I have to know that where I came from is not so great. I want that connection. The woman feels she wants that connection, but she has to also know that it's not the connection to a tzaddik, it's something else. That connection is at its root coming out of a part of Adam which is not his best part. How do we know this? because we mentioned before Psalms 144. And there he says the famous statement, Achol v'kedem tzartani, you've created me front and back. Psychologically, who's the front and who's the back? The male is the front, and his wife that came from him is his back. She comes from his back, she doesn't come from his front. Now, I want to explain what this means. This is not a statement about the woman, it's a statement about the connection. It's a statement that says that even though you want the connection to be with the best part of your partner, that's not where the connection comes from. The connection this is very frustrating, right? But the connection is going to be with his backside, which is his Russia side. Not Russia like Putin, Russia like evil side. Which might be the same. I don't know. It's frustrating, but that's where it is. Now, why is it? Because very simply, we said that the man doesn't feel the need for connection. He feels the need for something else. He gets married, his marriage is always, for the male, it's always including some element of being a Russia. What kind of Russia? Because he's thinking about his physical desires. The woman's not thinking about the physical desires as physical desires. She's thinking about them as a tool for connection. By the way, that's one of the deepest insights that young people have to have and older people have to have, especially men, that the whole sexual drive is to create connection, not to create satisfaction. This transformation, the moment that a person understands this, their life will change from end to end. That the reason that Hashem put in us a drive like this was to ensure connection, not to ensure satisfaction. This puts everything in a completely different light. When you think about young people who suffer from a very active sexual drive, especially the boys, just explaining this in these terms, that we have this drive in order to create the connection and not in order to fulfill our desire, to fulfill our satisfaction, to get to satisfaction, it changes the whole picture. Now, of course, why is this drive so strong? Because we said that naturally the male doesn't have the need for the connection. He doesn't have it. So to make up for that, to ensure that somehow he still is able to create a connection, Hashem made the sexual drive very strong. But some people miss it and they say, oh, it's just to satisfy me. But if you, and the whole point of Torah is to sublimate our desires, to understand what they are. So Hashem gave the sexual desire, ki lo tov heyot ha'adam levado, because it's not good for you to be alone. You don't know that because you think you're under God. But I'm telling you, and of course it's true, because he could stay alone and he would have no children, and that would be the end of that. It was a nice experiment having human beings, but didn't work out because I couldn't get him to connect. So I have to give him something in order to ensure that he connects. But again, this is like a very delicate point, because most men have not heard this statement, that the sexual desire is meant to create connection. It's meant to ensure the ongoing connection between the couple. And so if for some reason you don't get that, then it becomes very frustrating, everything, because I'm not satisfied. I'm not getting what I want. Instead of seeing it as an instrument to create something that you can't normally, naturally give. And so you need some kind of urge in order to force you into that situation. So that urge is the dark part. That's what we mean, the backside of the male. And what can you do? The woman is stuck in this situation where when she gets married, she's the tzaddikus, the son of the Rasha. She's in her capacity as a wife, she's now the daughter of the negative side of the male, not the positive side. Because what's the positive side? The positive side is that he's under Hashem. That if he really develops this properly, he mimics God. And it is a very good thing. But think about God. Who does God have a connection with? He needs a connection? He doesn't need anything. Let that sink in a little. If man, Adam, means I'm like God, so at my base, I don't need anything. For me to create a connection is like for God to create a world. It's that difficult. It's like a whole change, and I come out of myself somehow. I'm no longer alone. Somehow I'm also now with a world in front of me. And I now have a connection, and I want the connection because I created it. But still, what's the reason for that connection? It's amazing. We even say, why did God create the world? What's the highest reasons? 4 different reasons that we talk about usually. The highest reason of them all is because he craved the world. It sounds awfully familiar. Craving. It's like an urge. It's a desire. It's something that doesn't even have a reason for it. Nobody understands why there's a sexual urge. Why do you need it? Because it's unexplainable. It just is. But it mimics in that sense what the sages say about why God created the world, because it's an urge. Because if you don't have the urge, there won't be a world. If you don't have the urge, there won't be a marriage. There won't be a world that you're creating. Plus all the people that you're creating after you by having children and their children and so on. So she comes from the dark side of the man. Now, again, she looks at her husband now, and she has to come to terms with the fact that he has 2 sides to him. There's the one side where he's the creation of God, and he can be very, very pious, mamish tzaddik. And then there's the other side, which is why he chose to get married, which involves almost the opposite of being a tzaddik. Almost the opposite. And to which side is she more connected? So she wants to be connected to the tzaddik side, but she's more connected actually to the negative side. This has a very, very important repercussion for marriage, which is very difficult for most women to accept, is that whether you like it or not, you know the dark side of your husband. It's just the way it is, because that's where the connection was made. You can't run away from it. Every woman wants to think that my husband, why did I get married? Because I want a connection. And with whom? So I wanted to marry the tzaddik side of him, the side that was created directly from God. I want him to be pious. I want him to be an upright person. But here Hashem is saying, look, if there wasn't the other side, there would be no connection to begin with. The failures that the husband has is actually the root of the connection. And that, again, that's like, how fair is that? It's not. But if you think again about the origin of each, it's like there's no other way to do it. He won't go out of himself unless there is this urge, and that urge is what develops the entire dark side of the person. And that, in this sense, it's almost like he's saying that Freud was correct to a degree. Not the way that he said it, but he correctly identified that a lot of what goes wrong in a person has to do with the urges. That's what leads him down into the subconscious. But it's a positive thing. Let's say it the way that there's a whole literature called the literature of Heichalot in Kabbalah. This is early Kabbalah. It's from the time of the Mishnah. There they say that Adam, the first man, after he was created, he looked into the husks of impurity. He stared into it. And that's a description of the sin, the primordial sin in this literature. It's looking into the husks of impurity. The way the Chassidus explains this passage is that Hashem told him, you could have been like a god. But he said, but I'm very interested in the mundane material world. So he started looking into it. And he got so interested in it that he looked as far down as he could, even to the places that are impure. What happened? As a result, he fell into those places. It's like you look too far down until you fall over yourself. Now, really, what he did was, he made it possible to get married. Because what does it mean that he looked into his impurity? What does it mean that he wanted to connect with the mundane? He's looking down. We said before that the male is looking down, the woman is looking up. She's looking up, looking for a tzaddik. She's looking for someone who's very high. He's looking down because he wants to connect with the material world, which is not natural for him. In the same way that it's not natural, as it were, for God to create a world. He has to go out of himself to do that. So it turns out that, again, from another side, a woman has to understand, has to accept, let's call it, that she holds the key to transforming the urge, the desires, into an ability to connect with reality. I want to explain what I mean. That if a man was left to his own devices, he'd be disconnected from reality. What does it mean to be disconnected from reality? There's a lot of people that are single, and they work, and they do this, and they do that. To be disconnected from reality means that he doesn't marry, and he doesn't have children, doesn't have offspring. That's what it means to be disconnected. Why? Because we are all mortal, and the life ends, and the only question then is, how have you connected with reality by bringing life into the world, apart from your own life? So sometimes people can't bring life into the world, so they have other means of doing it. We won't discuss it now, but there's other means also, but it all happens through marriage. So to come down into the world means that I invest in the world, that I'm connected to the world. I'm doing something that is everlasting, has the power of the infinite, has the power of propagation, has the power of remaining after I'm gone. But this thing is very complex because it comes from his looking down. It doesn't come from his looking up. If he would be looking up, he wouldn't have a connection with the mundane. He wouldn't have a connection with the world. He wouldn't do anything to create life. He would stay sequestered in his own being without any interest. And so again, what is this pointing at? That the woman is in a very frustrating situation. That what I want is the connection, and yet the only way apparently to get the connection is to be willing to tolerate the dark side, the achol, the backside of the male. I have to tolerate it. Not only that, it's even more than that. I want to transform him. I want to take that dark side, that backside, and turn it into something positive. That it really formed the basis of our connection. That's what she really wants. She wants to sublimate it, to turn it into something positive. And that's a very difficult task. But it first of all requires an acceptance of the fact that it's always going to be at the basis. There's always going to be this part that the reason we're able to connect in the first place is because he's got issues. It's almost like, what? But I think everybody knows this, that it's true. Granted, there's a few people who are very rectified and so on. But like we always say, the only person that really knows a man is his wife. And she really knows what his problems are. And she has to deal with them. She can't run away from them because she wants the connection. It's almost like a setup. She wants the connection, and for the connection, she has to tolerate all of his negative sides. It's there. But if there were no negative sides, it wouldn't be a connection either. So it's almost like Hashem is, from any way we look at it, he's like there's a pasuk that says this, Nora alila al bnei adam, that he entraps us. It's entrapment. That's what it is. It's like, how do you get them to stay together? You entrap them. But you can't despair. Why can't you despair? Because the sages say, Akol mina isha, that everything is from the woman. That she has the power to really sublimate it, to rectify his backside. And she's committed to it because she wants the connection. So she tells him once, she tells him twice, she tells him 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Then the next day she says it again 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. And then this goes on for years. And either it has an impact, doesn't have an impact, but she can't stop. Because if she stops, then there won't be any connection at all. But she has the power to change him. Now, because it's his backside, guess what he doesn't know? Or at least can't admit. He doesn't know, and he certainly can't admit that he has a backside because it's his back. He can't even see it. She sees it as clear as day. He doesn't even know that it exists. It's really what it is. And so she tells him, and he's like, what are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with me. Then, he comes into the 21st century, and you're supposed to be more sensitive and more understanding, and you come to a class like this, and this rabbi sits there, and he tells you, and he shows you what we call, with ototu muftim, like with all these proofs from the Torah, that your whole connection is from your backside, and if you didn't have one, you wouldn't be able to even connect, and that you need to listen to your wife to be able to rectify it. So now he's stuck. He's stuck too. Because he says, maybe this is true. Maybe I really can't see. It's like what we say, that the camel can't see his hump. Which has more than one pun in it. But that's exactly the point. I can't see the part of me which is what leads to the connection, which is where I'm a Rasha, and which needs to be rectified, and my wife is stuck with it, and she tries to tell me this my whole life, and I can't hear, because I can't even admit that it exists, because I can't see it. But she can. Now, if this was all about just, we have to, take a step up and not leave it as just something technical. It's not just about connection in the end. People are deeper than that. So, for the woman, the connection, and for the man, the need to feel pious, to feel godly, are in the end positive things. They're not negative things. They're positive because when they work together, they change the world. And so really, when people get married, they don't, even if they're on a very immature, not conscious of themselves level, they still think about constructing a world, of building a house together. They still think about this home that they're going to build together. So certainly when we're talking between ourselves, and people here are on a much higher level, all of this is not just because as women we need connection, as men we need to feel pious, we need to feel godly. This all has a goal. This is all going somewhere. It's not just about us. We understand that we need to create this world together because otherwise there will be no world. And we understand that today when most of the countries in the world have fertility rates underneath, they can't even replace themselves, that the world is going into oblivion. We understand this. We understand that there's a higher calling to all of this. So you can't only focus on, okay, I'm going to make him better so that he connects more with me. And you can't always only focus on, I'll be more godly so that I look, or I'll be more pious so that I look more godly and more powerful and more providing and so on. You really don't look at it just like that. And you come and you say, in the end, what do we really want to do? The connection part, or the need for connection that the woman has, is in order to ground the couple together inside the world. And the godly part of man, of the husband, is there to elevate the home, to make it more godly. These two things can act in a very positive manner. It doesn't have to just be frustration. It can also be that I'm using these things for the good. So the male is using his desire to be godly to elevate the home and to make it more spiritual, to make it more upright, to make it more moral, to make it better. And the woman is using her need for connection to make sure that everything is grounded, that everything is affecting reality. It's not just sitting in the like thoughts in the air. That it's actually something that changes the lives of the people around them, the children, whatever. Like, how many men come home on time from work, and their wife comes and calls them, "Where are you? Where are you?" So if it's like my wife, what does she say? She doesn't say to me, "I need you." She says, "The children need you." Because that's what the connection is meant to do. It's meant to make you more impactful on reality. Her desire for connection, she turns it into something positive. And the something positive is to make sure that you are not floating around, not knowing what in the world you're doing in this world. And his need to feel godly, to feel that he's under God, so that is also something positive that he can bring all the time to the table and to elevate everything. But it's even more than that. One of the frustrations that women especially have, because again, they can see the backside of their husband and he can't see it, is that they want him to change and he can't change. It's very frustrating. So it's a very innovative idea in Chassidus. I mean, this is like, you have to listen, and If it doesn't sound right to you, ignore it. The innovative idea is that she can do tshuva for him. Never heard about something like that. How can I do tshuva for someone else? There's something wrong with you, and I'll do tshuva and you'll change. So, first of all, Reb Nachman says this very openly. He says, if I can see even a little bit of good in you, a point of good, that is my tshuva, because it's very difficult to find good in someone that you think is not so good. So that's my tshuva. And that itself, he quotes a pasuk from Tehillim, Od me'at ve'en rasha v'itbonant al mekomo ve'enenu. In a moment there will no longer be the rasha, because he will look at his place and it will be gone. He says, what does that mean? Od me'at ve'en rasha. If you even have a little bit, od me'at, even a little bit of good that you can see, then the evil will disappear. It's like a little bit of light pushes away all the darkness. But it's your tshuva, it's not his tshuva, because this rasha, he's not doing anything. He's just standing there with all his faults, all his problems. And yet if I can find a little bit of good in him, so that changes him. There's this concept. It's a very beautiful concept. But there's an even more powerful idea that appears in Chabad, which is, it's called, the Hebrew word is busha, and it means embarrassment. I can look at someone's negative side and feel embarrassed. I don't feel embarrassed because he's embarrassing me, because not that. I feel busha, it's like a feeling of remorse that this is how he has to be now. So what? So in Chabad it appears like this, that if I'm able to feel remorse, pain, embarrassment, that's pain, that's remorse over the other person's situation, that itself becomes the motivation for him to do tshuva. It's like when I look at my children with a certain look of I'm pained by the way you are, it affects them. But here we don't mean that you have to show it to them. Here we don't mean that you have to show the person how you feel. It's just the very fact that you feel like this, meaning that you're not critical, but rather that you feel the pain. You feel their pain, that they're in this state in the world and they don't have an easy way to get out of it. Because sometimes a person really can't do tshuva without help from the outside. And the help from the outside is not necessarily, it's not like giving them a hand. It's not physically giving them a hand. It's giving them your feeling. They need that feeling. It's like we're all, to use sort of like New Age language, since we're all connected. So especially when it's between a husband and a wife and there's really a connection, the very fact that I feel pain and not rejection, but rather remorse. Why is it that he needs to suffer and I need to see this, to suffer from this backside, this dark side that he has? And that itself becomes the chomer gelem. It's like the material from which tshuva is made. And this is a saying in the Talmud in Brachos. It says, "Kol haoseh dvar avera umitbayesh bo mochalin lo kol avonotav." That any person who transgresses, does something wrong, but then he has busha. It doesn't say that he does tshuva. Mitbayesh bo. Doesn't say that he changes his act. Doesn't change anything. The Gemara just says that all he needs to do is feel remorse. Not busha. He's embarrassed in himself. He says that's the most critical part of doing tshuva. It's even before the tshuva. It's that I feel embarrassed by that this is who I am. if I feel like that, that's the material out of which the tshuva will be made. And as it turns out, it really doesn't matter who feels that embarrassment. Sometimes the person himself can't feel it. Sometimes they can. But if I feel it for them, I'm giving them that material with which they can change. So why did we come to this? We came to this because we said that the woman is more frustrated because she sees the failings of her husband. She sees them. And she also feels that everything she's tried doesn't help. She said this, she sent him to counseling, he doesn't go to counseling, she doesn't. So what can she do? So comes Chassidus and says that even just feeling this busha, feeling this embarrassment. Again, embarrassment doesn't mean that I come to him and say, I'm embarrassed because of you. Embarrassment is an inner feeling. That I feel, even if he doesn't feel embarrassed, I feel embarrassed for him. And that itself becomes a catalyst for the change that he's going to experience. Okay, so there's a lot to think about in all of this. And really, if we don't have time now, but really after all these things, the thing to do is to break up into couples and to try to discuss this and to see how you understand it and how it plays out in your own relationship. And especially, I think, that the first part that we talked about, the need for connection and the need to be godly, this is something that I feel that can solve so many issues before they even start by young people. Just to understand this and to understand that the sexual urge is meant to create a connection, and that's why it's so much more powerful in the male than it is in the female, because he naturally doesn't have the need for a connection. So this is what drives him. If there's any questions, I don't know if anybody feels like questions, then we can try. Yeah.
That sexual urge that you were just talking about, how much of procreation plays into that for males?
That's the whole point. The whole point is to get to procreation. But you can't procreate if there's no connection. Right? Is that what you meant?
Oh, I see. So it's one thing leading towards procreation.
And that means being in the world.
So ultimately, all of it is just about procreating.
No. To say it like that is almost to make us into robots. The point is that to become a creator, right? To become a creator, I have to be invested in reality. I can't be a creator in any area if I'm not invested in it, but all the more so when it comes to life itself. In life itself, I have to feel that I am. And that's exactly how he needs to feel. The man and woman together have to feel that they're creating a world. First in their home, and then in the children, and then in everything that comes out of that. Because we were meant to be like the Creator. That's what it means, that we're similar. We're similar to Him. Yeah.
Maybe two questions. Did Adam not have, or was there not an omen for Chava? And how does that play into things? And didn't God create all the other beings as pairs? And why would Adam initially?
So wait, we'll do one at a time because I can't think I have to think of the answer. And then we usually associate the first Chava with what we call today the feeling that a woman doesn't need anyone. Because she wasn't created from him. The first Chava was created like him from the earth itself. And so, I'm not the one to discuss this because I know almost nothing about it. But Rabbi Nir Manusi is going to be here hopefully in February, and he's going to bring one of his books that he's just translated. He's the expert on this, on feminism. And there's a form of feminism that takes from that Chava, and it's called, she has a name also. And they associate with her, 100%. And what do they say? that she was his complete equal in not needing at all, not needing connection. And like the counter movement to this now is the opposite. That women are saying, but I do feel this need for connection. I'm not like her. I'm like the second Chava, who was more rectified. And again, the picture here is that if she doesn't have this need for connection, it also doesn't lead in the end to creating, to procreation, to creating a world, to creating everything. So the first Chava, where is she? She's living her life alone somewhere. What? So we don't say her name. We say, instead of saying the full name, we say Lily. That's themselves. Now you know.
She's still alive.
Okay.
She's still alive?
All these things are not exhibits in a museum. They're powers that exist in the world, and so women can fall into this world of the first Chava. And then she says, I don't need anything. I'm completely independent. I will not succumb to this feeling of needing the connection. I'm not going to be dependent on man. And sometimes it's out of anger. It could be out of frustration, whatever it is. But it's like that this option exists. It's there. So, okay, now the second question.
I guess maybe you answered it already. Why wouldn't God have created man and woman like
Okay.
because,
Right. Right. We'll do woman, man, woman.
That's just eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay. So I was wondering if a man and a woman, I heard it said, were like, I mean, there's different depictions of what they were like. Like Adam had both male and female originally, and the two sides separated. I know that's you were sort of talking about that, the back side and the front side. But then, is it so much that she came from him, or that she was part of him, and then and he was part of her, and they sort of disconnected the two male and female energies or sides or whatever you want to say, and they have to come back together to recreate life again, I guess. I don't.
That's
I know it's energetic, and it's
No, it's fine.
The natural perception is that men come from women because there's childbirth, which is the natural perception.
That's the biological. Yeah, it's not the psychological though.
This is a different.
Psychologically, he feels that he's from God.
Okay.
Meaning that this creature, that you can call it any name you want, and you can then say he's not a male, he's not a man. So I don't know what he is. Then he's something else. But that's not the way the Torah describes it. The Torah describes it, and it's on purpose this way. When you first read it, what do you hear? That's why people say a rib, because it's very hard to imagine. Because of the Torah's language, it's hard to imagine that this was really two people together. What it sounds like is that there was a male, he's called a male, he's treated as a male, and then he doesn't have a partner. Why would he need a partner if he already has a partner in him? There's animals that don't need sexual procreation. They just do it inside themselves. That would be that type of procreation. It just comes out of themselves. So the Torah's depiction is it's mysteriously very clear. Like it says, he was a male, and then suddenly he took a part of it and he made a female. So again, you can try to explain it away by saying what the Torah really means is that he was both. But again, that's not how that's not the reading. When you read it, that's not the picture that comes out. Then the sages later say, where was the female in him? So one of them says, Shmuel and Rav, they had two opinions. One says she was a tail, he says, and the other one says she was a head. Well, she was a nun. But she's not like another creature that's like joined as two. So this
Siamese twins or something?
right. That's not that's not what's being discussed. It's something entirely different. And again, when you think about it biologically, then it's very hard to imagine what this is.
Right.
But the moment you think about it psychologically, it's very easy.
So it's got to be looked only not as a biology.
So the moment again, not that the Torah is not talking about biology, it's also talking about biology. But here I said I'm focusing on how we need to understand this psychologically.
But if she's the head, where's his head?
She was the backside of the head.
She's the backside.
Okay. Like the tail is like the backside of the
Spinal column.
right. It's where in the spinal column is she connected.
You mean the coccyx?
The whole thing.
We're getting better.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. I have no idea what he said.
But is that why he has a problem in his back, because she got taken out of this?
We just need it too.
Everybody has problems in their back. I don't know.
No, I mean.
Yes. That's what you meant. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But again, we're not talking physiologically.
I understand that.
We're talking about the backside of the psyche.
But if she's taken out, does that,
She came from his backside. She understands it,
she understands it, but he's lacking in his.
but he can't see it.
Because he doesn't know he has a lack, but she sees it.
She
From there.
again, what we said, what it means that she is it, is that the connection is based on it. That's where she feels the connection. Okay, Mushka, you were before, so.
So when Moses wants to see Hashem,
Mm-hmm.
Hashem says, "I'm only going to show you my backside." Is there any that's one thing? That's one.
That's interesting.
And then the second one is that when you talk about the godly side of man, I know that men crave connection, spiritual connection.
To what?
Natural, to God,
Right.
right? So
But it's not a connection to God. It's to be God.
to be God.
To be godly. You can't say to be God because they can't be God.
Right.
They crave to be godly.
Oh.
I've known people that have craved to be closer to God.
There's all kinds of godly. There's godly power. I want to be powerful like God. I want to be a superhero. I want to be this. I want to be that. There's godly that he wants to be pious also.
So this
To
back
provide, to
there
give.
is like the animalistic urges. Is that what you're
It can be translated into animalistic urges. But the whole point of the connection with a woman is to sublimate those. And to really, that she wants him to be godly in the sense of pious.
Okay. And then what about the backside?
Okay, so now by Hashem, what we say is like this. You can't see my front side, you can only see my back side. So the usual explanation is, you can only see let's call it the scientific reasons for why things happen in the world. The logical reasons for why things happen. But you can't see the way I really think. Okay? That's the way that's usually explained. But, because you're raising it already, so we need to think about it in psychological terms also. So what does it mean that I only see Hashem's backside? So it's very easy to understand what that means. That by most people, what do they see by Hashem? When do they see Hashem? When it seems like the negative sides are coming out. That's like the backside. Then they see, now I realize Hashem is here and he's to blame for everything. Yeah. The front side is very hard to see. That he's all good and it's all meant to be for the best. That's hard to see. That's very hard to see. And in fact, what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu because of that? He wrote Eov. The whole book of Job is an exploration of trying in some way to see the front side of Hashem even in the worst places. So that's the tradition. He wrote 3 books. One of them is Job. That's his Sefer Shel Rashaim. He has 3 books. Sefer Shel Tzadikim, Sefer Shel Benunim, Sefer Shel Rashaim. His book of Tzadikim is obviously the Torah. Sorry. His book of Tzadikim is the Torah. His book of Rashaim is Parshas Bilam. And his book of Benoni, which is the state of every person, is like Job. That's the original Tanya. dealing with the same issues exactly. Anyway, yes.
What was God's purpose in creating the first wife? Then
So he said that it's not good for him to be alone.
no, but I mean, yes, but then why did he have to go and create Eve?
Oh, now I understand. Sorry, I didn't understand what you said. There's a principle that says that the beginning of every act, especially of creation, but of every attempt to move forward is always first chaotic. The first attempt always falls apart. And then it's only afterwards that you can come to something that actually works. This is called, by Chazal, it's called Tohu Kadam Letikun. There's always chaos before there's order. It doesn't mean there has to be evil before there's good. That's not what it means. It means that the first attempt is always an approximation. And you can't get it right on the first attempt. But you have to try. And you have to not be afraid to fall in the first attempt. There's a saying from Rabbi Yehuda in the Medrash. He says that God was creating many worlds and destroying them until he came to our world. And so, why did he finally stop with our world? So he says because he said all those previous worlds they didn't provide me with satisfaction. El lo mehanyan li v'zeh mehanyan li. So the question still begs itself. So why didn't those worlds give you satisfaction and this world gave you? So the answer that's given in Chassidus is, I think, mind-blowing. It says like this, that all the previous worlds, the moment they weren't right, they fell apart. They couldn't stand the fact that things don't come out perfect the first time. So they came out imperfect, and so they fell apart. Our world was the first one to look back and say, wait a minute, that's not working. You have to accept the imperfection. And move on. And try to build it as you go along. That's the secret of this world. Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam, that the tzaddik falls 7 times before he gets up. Even a tzaddik falls down in this world. Because you can't get it right the first time. That's like the principle of this world. And this world is robust enough that it doesn't fall apart because of that. Yeah.
So I understand the story, what you said, but it seems to me that Hashem blew a soul in each person, not just man. And so each woman has a piece of Hashem, is a piece of Hashem, right?
Right.
And so, just as a woman, I understand the need for connection, but also the need to be connected to Hashem is the greatest of all of them. So I don't know how that fits into what you were just
Okay, so let me try. It's a very interesting question.
And
But
is that
when,
not through Bible?
yes, is that
so he blew so he blew the breath of life into the atom. He didn't blow it into the woman after she was separated. It was into him. He's the one who gets his breath of life. Because it was before they were separated.
But they were one.
But again, this whole one again means that it's the male part that feels this connection to God. So it means that, of course, a woman also has a male part. What's her male part? So what you're saying is that the soul is the male part in the woman.
no, when a child is born,
Yeah.
Hashem doesn't breathe a soul into the
Again, now you're talking about ontologically what's going on now.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand the origins of everything. In the origins, nobody was born then.
Right.
There was only the second generation that was born.
Okay.
These, even describing it this way, like, how can it be that human beings are suddenly created out of earth and then one out of the other? It's not anything that we know about. We've never seen anything like that. So the easiest way for us to relate to this is to say this is not a biological description. It may also be a biological description in some way that I don't understand. I'm not saying that's impossible. And I say, for me, it's much easier to understand this as a psychological origin. So the psychological origin is that the male is the one who feels that he should be, he's one with God. And she feels, like you said, to be connected to God. You even use the language, the feminine language, to be connected. A male is not interested in being connected.
So how is
Even with God.
connected to God?
What?
How is she connected?
Through him.
That doesn't sound too good.
So,
No,
Yeah.
but that's something that doesn't work there.
So
Why?
I just wanted to clarify, like the way I understand it would be that, the woman does have that desire to have a connection to Hashem, and throughout her life she does. But the ultimate, I think we're saying the ultimate connection is through the marriage of a man and
Right.
a woman, and that's the ultimate, not meaning that a woman before she's married cannot connect to God or doesn't desire it.
not only that, there was a piece in the Wonders, I think you even brought it in the things that you brought. It's about divorce, that after a woman is divorced, this comes from Pshischa, that she becomes connected to Hashem directly, but not directly really, through the Torah. By a male, it's like it's not even the Torah. It's just him and Hashem. That's how he feels. He and God are best buddies. In fact, like I said, they're the same thing.
So if this is a paradigm from Adam and Eve, we're saying this is all mankind. This is
Yeah,
not
of
Jewish.
course.
You mentioned Torah, but today a lot of the world is Christian or Muslim, whatever. But
Christians have Torah.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why I
The
said.
Muslims don't.
Well, no, they have their own version of what they're trying to gather somewhere.
Right, but it's not the Torah. They have something else, and they do it through that.
Yeah, they took a lot of our ideas, though. But so my point is, though, my question is, they still have to connect men directly with God, even no matter where they are and where they're raised in the whole world. It's man in its entirety.
Because this is Adam and Eve. It's before there's
So
Judaism.
Before Torah,
Yeah.
it's before Jews. It's
Again, this explains every woman, I think, and explains every man.
So you're saying this is universal.
That's the way you see it.
And then a woman on her own, you said, if she doesn't have a man, she can find the connection through some version of Torah or some version of
No, only after divorce.
only when she's made that connection.
Right. Once the connection has been made, it's retained through the Torah. Because the Torah is always another path of connection to Hashem.
What about a man who isn't married or didn't his connection?
So he has a connection to God, he just doesn't have a connection to reality. Because he can be very, very pious. Right?
Right, but her connection to reality, her connection to God is not through Bittul, you're saying?
Not through Bittul?
Bittul.
No.
Her connection is through,
She doesn't need Bittul. That was what I started with.
doesn't need.
In fact, it feels wrong. There's something wrong about
What
it.
is it that she needs connection?
What do
God.
you need in order to have connection? No. So it's much more yesh than it is ayin.
So then how is she connecting to her base by the home and
So,
the house and the...
There's a simple thing that the Rav likes to say all the time. He says that men love happy women. Well, you just said, Emma benim simcha. Joy is like the connector.
Okay, so where he's going to go for the Bittul, she's going to go for the joy.
Right.
But that connects her.
And that's exactly how we understand Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is bittul, and Bina
Right,
is...
that's why I said it, but like then her connection is to, she wants, her simcha's connecting her to Hashem also, and her simcha's connecting her to the world. So her simcha is the source of all her connection.
Right? Could be. We're thinking this through together. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, but.
It makes sense.
Like the man, when he like wakes up in the morning, he thinks he has to have bittul to connect Hashem.
Otherwise, he thinks he's God, right? Or, in order to feel that he's God, he has to have bittul. In either case,
And when she wants to connect to God and to serve God, she thinks, or
she makes, she creates.
she creates.
So I just had a question. So,
Yeah.
when you said that the busha that the woman can feel on behalf of her husband, how does that effectuate in behavior from a woman towards a man in that circumstance?
very good question. Needs to
Like,
be,
how does that manifest?
I don't know. It needs to. This needs to be developed more.
Repeat the question.
When a woman feels that embarrassment or remorse for the state of her husband, for the negative things in him, because she can't change him, but then she feels the pain, and that itself becomes the catalyst for his change. What does that actually look like? Like, what is the behavior of a person who feels something like this? So I gave one example, which I don't think is exactly relevant, is that I can look at my child and feel this. But I think it's different there, because I show them something. And from what I understand in Chassidus, it's not about showing it. It's just about feeling it. Because when you show it to a child, you know what, even maybe by a child, it's not such a good idea. The more you show it, the less impact it'll have. It's like almost something that the more it's contained within me, the more impact it has. I don't know how to explain it any more than that. It could be because that shows frustration.
It's dignified.
It's dignified for sure. Yeah.
Actual
Right.
feeling that
That's the word I was looking for.
that totally brings out an energy to someone else that you're not shaming them.
Right.
Giving
But
them
you
their
care
dignity.
about them.
You care about them, exactly.
The second question I
Is
have
that compassion? Is that what
It's definitely connected to compassion. It's this busha is part of. It comes from compassion. It doesn't come from anger. It doesn't come from. Right? So
The second
it's
question I have is like from the backside when was created. So does that mean that the women also have that yetzer hara or that unclean because she's coming from that part? So
no. You could think that, but my understanding is that she has understanding in it, not that she has it. It's like to understand something, you have to have experienced it in some way. So it's like she has it in the background, but she understands what it is. She can see it.
So she has a little bit of it, but she can see it objectively because
She doesn't have it like in the sense that she suffers from it. She has an image of it. She has some kind of understanding of it. I don't know how to say it more than that. Yeah.
Would that be like if a guy like tries to tell a girl like the problem that he might be having with his eyes looking around? So the woman usually kind of laughs and says, like that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah.
Like she knows
Of course.
the concept of it.
Those are the easy problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about the connection, to me, I understand that as being like an emotional connection. And
Also?
that's the biggest complaint from women
Right,
is
right,
that
right.
he doesn't. There's no emotional.
They're emotionally starved.
Right. So are you going to do a class on how to create how to?
No, usually I just line the men up and hit them. That's the only way to do it.
You have to do that, and we can't, right?
Yeah.
She wants to know when that class is.
How do they learn that language?
That's why we send them to Torah Nefesh. And we teach them over 3 years. We try to open them up, and then yeah. Sorry, we'll get to you. Just go ahead.
So in a way, if I'm understanding this correctly, this is really not something of a lowering or demeaning women. It actually speaks of their power. Because
Why would it be demeaning?
you said some women take this the hard way.
Because the whole story to them sounds like it's some kind of demean, right? Because the plain meaning sounds like it's something
Right, the
demeaning.
plain
Right.
meaning, but the truth is, the vocabulary, we can say that's where the idea of behind every powerful man is or successful man is a powerful woman. This world thinks of it from a material perspective, the secular world. But the truth is, it really is a spiritual and psychological accomplishment.
I agree 100%, and not to belittle what you said, but I have to say what Rav Shandel used to say about this. He used to say, behind every successful man there stands a bewildered woman, not understanding how in the world he's even successful. Why? Because she knows. Yeah, go ahead.
I actually have two questions. Question number one is, what about women who are not married? Are they not, will they not be able to connect to something greater through Torah? I mean, so like, what happens then?
There's a feeling of lack, like for sure. I mean, I've never been in that position, both because
Well,
for obvious reason.
Yeah, the women that are not married, it's like a 24/7 you feel lack.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like something is always.
That's what it means that you want a connection.
Yeah.
I think that I wouldn't be wrong if I said that feeling a connection to a man and feeling a connection to God is almost the same thing. They fill the same place. And so, what's the second one?
A second question is, do you think some women, when you talk about remorse and that embarrassment, do you think some women could it be that not even women, but human beings can be, certain human beings can be so compassionate and feel so much more remorse that it's hard for them to actually...
That's how a Rebbe feels. When you go to a Rebbe and he sees these things, then the pain that they feel, about the Tzemach Tzedek, they said that between people that he saw, he had to change his shirts and his undershirt because he sweated so much from the tension of feeling the pain of the other person, but that itself was a catalyst for change. That's where it comes from. That's actually where it comes from the Rebbe's describing how they felt, and that was essential for the beginning of the change, even though they may not have said anything, they just experienced it. Yes.
So in the beginning of the class, I thought you were going to take it a different direction. Since this is a Torah and Psychology, Torah and Nefesh class, when you mentioned bittul, the next thing I automatically think of is shiftless.
Mm-hmm.
Especially coming after Yud Aleph Cheshvan with the Rachel Imenu's Yortzeit. Then, in talking about building reality, we often talk in terms of Rachel Imenu about Binyan parts of Rachel. So, in short, the way that I understood it is that the bittul for the husband is that everything comes from my wife, meaning my ability to rectify reality, and ultimately myself comes through my wife. And the shiflet of the woman is that everything is from my husband, that I get everything from my husband. That's the way that I understood it.
Could be. I didn't think in those terms at all, so it sounds right. I was thinking all the time, more bittul to Hashem. And
the second you said that bittul doesn't work for women, I'm like, well, what about shiftless?
No, definitely shiftless is the more feminine. But usually we say that they have to be in the same person. You're saying, you said it. It sounds right to me.
Are you saying Rachel was so exemplified bittul because of the actions she took in her life?
No, shiftless. It's
lowliness.
What's the difference?
That's the first class in the series.
First courses. In a nutshell, shiftless means lowliness means accepting my faults, accepting myself as I am, understanding. Actually, there's a piece I think in this Wonders that talks about. It's probably not this one. It's next week's. That change occurs in the dynamic between knowing that I can never change and accepting how I am with all my faults, and completely believing in 100% that everything can change. It's like a paradox that the person has to hold, and the more they hold this paradox, the more change becomes possible. But direct change or direct pessimism, they don't do anything. So loneliness is like accepting myself with all my faults, knowing that this is the way I am.
Why is that called lowliness?
It's the word that's used by David HaMelech. He says, "Va'iti shafal b'einai," that I will be lowly in my own eyes. If there's a better translation, I'm happy to hear it. I've been using this word for about 15 years. What?
Humble.
No, humble is anava, humility. It's a different word. So anyway, yes.
Two observations just to
Can you make a movie out of it?
Huh?
Can you make a movie out of this? I think every single movie. I think that every single movie that's ever been made is about this theme, and it doesn't, and they don't tell you.
Cinderella.
Every single movie that has a man and a woman, and every single movie has a man and a woman. So that's what it's about.
Dynamic, but just a hint to what you're saying that women are looking for connection. There's the biological manifestation. The most obvious one is that the embryo is connected by cheverat tabu, by
Right.
the cord, the
Right.
umbilical cord. And the second is the letter tshuva and busha,
Oh.
very similar. It's just,
Very interesting.
the tough
Very
there
interesting.
is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's very good. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, thank you very much for coming. I hope I can see you on Sunday, if not in Oxnard on Shabbos. And I really hope that this passes on, because I really think that there's, my wife's a genius and she hit upon it.
The information is on the back of Wonders, so anyone can pick out a copy, and the information for the upcoming events are on the back.